In the sweltering cotton fields of Tiptonville, Tennessee, a boy with blistered fingers and a battered guitar would one day give birth to a sound that kicked open the doors to rock and roll. Carl Lee Perkins, born April 9, 1932, did not emerge from privilege or promise. He came from dirt floors and hardship, with calluses on his hands and dreams in his heart. That he would one day shake the music world from the banks of the Mississippi to the streets of Liverpool seems, in retrospect, nothing short of astonishing. Carl's childhood was etched into the soil of the South, a landscape scorched by sun and poverty. He labored in cotton fields with his brothers Jay and Clayton from the age of 6. Their family's meager earnings left no room for toys or luxuries, but music came free. It floated on the warm Tennessee air, from the gospel harmonies sung by field hands to the Grand Ole Opry broadcasts that crackled through the family's radio on Saturday nights. When Carl pleaded for a guitar, his father did what many in his position would not. He made one. A cigar box, a broomstick, and baling wire became the first conduit through which Carl channeled the soul of the Delta. Eventually, a battered Gene Autry model came into the boy's possession in exchange for $3 and a chicken. It might as well have been Excalibur. His first mentor, John Westbrook, a field worker with blues and gospel in his veins, showed Carl that a guitar was more than wood and string. "Feel it vibrate," Westbrook said, and Carl did, through his fingers, into his bones. The knots tied into broken strings sliced into his flesh, compelling him to slide notes instead of fret them clean. Without knowing it, he had stumbled into a technique that would later define his sound. By 14, Carl was playing beer joints with his brother Jay. At the Cotton Bowl Tavern, they earned tips, bruises, and a reputation. The Perkins Brothers Band expanded to include Clayton on bass, and with the addition of W.S. Fluke Holland on drums, they had a unit tight enough to take on the world. Their shows were raw, energetic, and often violent. They performed in dives where fists flew with the music, but they kept going. Local radio picked them up. Carl's voice, full of backwoods grit and country soul, became a regular on the airwaves in Jackson. By 1953, Carl married Valda Kreider. With her encouragement, he left the bakery job that barely paid the bills and committed himself fully to his music. By 1954, he had begun recording with Sun Records in Memphis, drawn there by the sounds of Elvis Presley and the belief that Sam Phillips might just understand what he was trying to do. Sam Phillips did more than understand. He saw the storm behind Carl's smile. In 1955, after a few local hits, Carl penned a tune that would take him into the stratosphere. Blue Suede Shoes, inspired by a throwaway comment about fancy footwear, became a snarling, twang-laced anthem. Released in early 1956, it shot up the charts, reaching the top in country, R&B, and pop, a trifecta rarely seen. He was set to appear on the Perry Como Show, poised to bask in the national spotlight. But fate swerved cruelly. En route to New York, the band's car collided with a truck in Delaware. Carl suffered a concussion and fractured vertebrae. Jay was gravely injured. Their momentum evaporated in a hospital room. While Carl lay broken, Presley performed Blue Suede Shoes on national television, turning the song into a household name, but not in Carl's voice. Perkins eventually returned to the stage, his neck in a brace and fire in his belly. Though he never again matched the chart performance of Blue Suede Shoes, his output remained sharp and his performances electric. Songs like Matchbox, Your True Love, and Boppin' the Blues crackled with country grit and R&B swagger. But the music industry, ever fickle, had moved on. While peers like Presley, Cash, and Lewis surged, Carl drifted. The late 50s brought more sorrow. Jay died in 1958 after battling a brain tumor. Carl, devastated and aimless, slipped into the bottle. He bounced from label to label, including Columbia and Decca, recording solid work that received little support. At one point, he accidentally shot himself in the ankle, and later lost part of a finger to an electric fan. His luck, it seemed, had a personal vendetta. Then came a glimmer. In 1964, Chuck Berry persuaded Carl to join him on a British tour. Carl hesitated, unsure he still had fans overseas, but what awaited him was a revelation. Crowds roared his name. The Beatles, then exploding across the globe, welcomed him as a hero. George Harrison had learned to play guitar by mimicking Carl's riffs. They covered Honey Don't, Matchbox, and Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. Suddenly, Carl Perkins was relevant again. The Beatles weren't alone. Eric Clapton, Paul McCartney, and countless others revered his playing. Ringo Starr told him flat out that his style had shaped their sound. For Carl, who had weathered decades of obscurity and disappointment, the admiration of the world's biggest band was more healing than applause. From the late 60s into the 70s, Carl joined Johnny Cash's touring review. He played lead guitar on stage and in the studio, including the rowdy A Boy Named Sue live at San Quentin. He wrote Daddy Sang Bass, a heartfelt country gospel number that became a major hit for Cash and perhaps Carl's most personal composition. On a tour stop in California, Carl experienced a moment of reckoning. After a 4-day binge, he walked onto a beach with a bottle in hand, fell to his knees, and begged for strength. He hurled the bottle into the sea and never looked back. The man who had once drowned his grief in liquor found redemption in sobriety and spirituality. Carl Perkins off stage was a man defined by his humility. While he rubbed shoulders with royalty and rock stars, he remained grounded in Tennessee. He and Valda stayed married for 45 years, raising 4 children. He was particularly proud of his sons Stan and Greg, who performed with him in later years. Carl's experiences with childhood hardship inspired him to give back. In 1981, he helped establish the Carl Perkins Center for the Prevention of Child Abuse in Jackson, Tennessee. The center became a haven for vulnerable children, and its annual Circle of Hope telethon drew support from across the state. The 1980s brought a long overdue resurgence. He recorded Get It with Paul McCartney for the album Tug of War. Then came the legendary Blue Suede Shoes, a Rockabilly session in 1985, where Carl took the stage with Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and Rosanne Cash. The performance ended with a tearful Carl surrounded by friends and legends, singing the song that had both made and nearly broken him. He returned once more to Sun Studios in 1986 to record Class of '55 with Cash, Lewis, and Orbison, a nostalgic celebration of their beginnings. He played with the Judds, Dolly Parton, and Willie Nelson. Go Cat Go, released in 1996, became his last album, a fitting finale packed with duets alongside Bono, Tom Petty, John Fogerty, and Paul Simon. In the summer of 1997, Carl began to slow down. A series of strokes followed. On January 19, 1998, at the age of 65, he died in Jackson, Tennessee. The music world mourned, and the funeral drew the likes of George Harrison, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Garth Brooks. George Harrison closed the service with an acoustic rendition of Your True Love. The man who had once played for Beer and Bruises now had Kings of Song singing him to rest. Carl was buried in Ridgecrest Cemetery, not far from the roads he'd once driven between gigs in the Mississippi twilight. His wife Valda joined him in 2005, followed shortly after by their son Greg. Carl Perkins didn't just write songs. He carved melodies out of hardship, rhythm out of desperation, and chords out of sweat. His music wasn't clean-cut or polished. It twanged, rattled, and pulsed with something primal. With a battered guitar, he tore through boundaries and stitched country to blues to rhythm and back again. What others polished, he had forged. What others mimicked, he had lived. He gave the world blue suede shoes, but he also gave it swagger, a rebel strut that turned every backwoods kid into a rock star in waiting. He never became the pop idol others did. He didn't need to. He was the grit under the glitter, the rhythm before the roar.